when we hear the word Bofors, it's likely that we associate it with the gun that won India the Kargil War. But for those of us old enough to remember, Bofors was actually and remains synonymous with one of India's biggest corruption scandals, one that was exposed for what it was, a murky tale of kickbacks, bribes, cover ups, and a cover up that involved politicians, bureaucrats, arms dealers, and middlemen. On the program today, we'll be meeting the iconic journalist Chitra Subramaniam, who broke that story, who's just out with a new book that takes us deep inside Bofors Gate. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. The most startling revelation in Chitra Subramaniam's new book on Bofors is that India still does not know the truth of one of the biggest corruption and political scandals to have dominated our headlines for decades. Would you believe that there is a sealed box of documents with the CBI that no government, as Chitra Subramaniam's book reveals, has bothered to open? That there was a cover up was documented painstakingly in Chitra Subramaniam's iconic and landmark journalism. This book deals with the key protagonists, including Ottavio Kotroki, the man who was verified to have received a bribe in this scandal and the man who was allowed to get away. Kotroki is no longer alive, but the ghosts of Bofors still haunt India. Some of us may remember them only as names: Martin Ardbo, Win Chadda, Ottavio Kotroki, and then also all the politicians that got pulled into this quagmire: Rajiv Gandhi, Arun Singh, VP Singh, Arun Nehru. So many names. Even the Bachchans. At one point, Amitabh Bachchan found himself pulled into the swamp that had become Bofors. Chitra Subramaniam's hell of a book, Bofors Gate, takes you deep inside this story. Who was responsible for the cover up? Do we know the truth? Will we ever know the truth? And if we do not know the truth, why do we not know the truth? These are the questions that all good journalists must ask, and Chitra Subramaniam continues to ask those questions in her book, part memoir, part expose, Bofors Gate. I want to introduce now our newsmaker to the program. Chitra Subramaniam is with us. For so many of us in our generation, we grew up admiring Chitra's work, her landmark journalism, and it is very special for me to be able to interview you today, Chitra, on your book. And it brought back so many memories. You know, much of this story unfolded when I was not yet a journalist, but this is an issue that has actually lived through decades of politics. And I think before I get into, your very, very human account of what it meant to be a journalist pursuing the story, the most startling thing is what your book opens with and closes with, that India still does not know the truth, that there is a document or a box of secret documents, all the Bofors papers, as it were, they are with the CBI. We no longer have a government that was directly linked to Bofors. This is not the Congress government. This is the BJP government, and it's its third consecutive term. And what we do not know yet why nobody has bothered to open this box. I mean, that is just shocking. And I have to confess that I had forgotten that there's still a box of these documents. Are you saying effectively that we do not yet know the full truth of Bofors?
Thank you, Barkha. That's very kind of you and a very generous introduction. And it's an honor to be speaking to you. Yes, I mean, this was like 10 years of my life. As a journalist, you follow a story, 1986 to 19. And let us not forget that this is the first time in the history of India that you won in a Swiss court. Swiss laws were redone. Can you imagine? I mean, there was a change in Swiss law because of Bofors. And it was very historic what happened. And then the documents have been sitting, and government after government comes and says, corruption, corruption, this, corruption, that. But then they don't open the boxes. which to me is astonishing. And I don't understand why they don't open it, because you would think that it's in the interest of every government, and especially one that in the opposition, to open the boxes, right? So they're just sitting there, and I think they should be opened at the very
One
least.
One of the questions that your book raises is whether these documents might have been destroyed by previous governments, the Congress-led governments, and you conclude that you do not believe that to be true because you believe the BJP would have raised hell. Now, the BJP, when it was in opposition, consistently attacked the Congress for linkages to Bofors. Now, it has been, as I was saying, it is now the third term of a BJP-led government. Uh, Modi, the prime minister, is not known to be soft on the Gandhi family or the Congress party in any way. What is your understanding of why this sealed box of Bofors documents with the CBI has not been opened?
See, I don't want to get into any conspiracy theories or understanding. My understanding is that, this is beyond, for me, beyond Congress or beyond BJP or anything. As I say in the book, it's a self respect of a nation. You've gone out and you've fought stuff abroad, and, corruption has been proved. So even if the documents have been destroyed, you can get copies from Switzerland. They are known to keep copies. I mean, this country is known to keep copies for hundreds of years. So it's just a phone call away. And I keep saying this, that why don't you? I don't have any understanding. And as a journalist, Barkha, I don't want to have any understanding because I don't want to make a compromise with the truth.
Absolutely. So let's get to some of the very textual details that emerge in your book. The first thing that I think really came home for me was the cost of pursuing the truth,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And you share being a mother with a young child at home. You talk about how at one point in the investigation, which as you said was 10 years of your life, you start receiving threats directly. This is an age before the age of WhatsApp calls and so on. There are messages left on your machine saying that your son would be killed. You are able to tell that these calls are coming from India. How do you cope with that?
I just coped, you know. I mean, there's thing about I could have stopped, right? But there was something inside me that said, no, you have to go on. I was afraid. There were moments I was very, very afraid. But I think I had an environment. I felt I had my husband, and my car brakes were slashed. My windshield wiper was broken. I mean, and I went under my car with a broom to see if there was a bomb. And there were moments I got very scared because there were documents posed outside my flat. But Barkha, I can't explain why I just continued. Now, when I look back, I'm afraid what I did. I mean, if my daughter did something like this, I would go through the roof. But that time, I just went on because somewhere I felt that, I mean, India needed to know the truth, right? I mean, call it anything, call it idealism, call it patriotism, call it whatever. But I needed to go to the end of the story. And you've been a journalist, you've pursued stories despite great risks. So you know what it is. It's like when a story gets to you, you just can't sleep. And then, of course, the sources came, and I started getting the sources, and then I found that I was getting information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the very perceptive things you've said is that the fear comes later. You say that today when you look back, you're like, oh my God, how did I do it?
Yeah.
But when you're living that story, when you're
Mm.
consumed by it,
Yes.
you literally can't. I always say when people say, why did you become a journalist? I said, unless it gives you that knot in your stomach, unless it keeps you up at night, you're meant to be doing something else. I mean, you're a
Exactly.
journalist if this keeps you up at night, and nobody has the absence of fear. It's all about displacing or deflecting or postponing the fear till you do your job, and then the fear hits you. So, but again, you are not you don't necessarily have organizational support when you're breaking the story. And we'll
Yeah.
come to this later in the conversation. You have a somewhat tense, fraught equation with the Hindu, where you first begin to send your exposes, including with the editor N. Ram, and we'll come to that later. But I think what really shines through is this conflict that you're managing between being a mother and a journalist. And I think at some point you say the thrill of journalism, basically won over the guilt of motherhood. And that is something so real. And, of course, it could happen to fathers as well. But in particular, we as women deal with this. Talk a little bit about that. Your son is getting death threats. I mean, there are threats saying that your son will be killed. You're a new mother, a young mother. You don't have organizational support. You're getting these midnight calls. Um, your whistleblower is looking out for you, but knows that I says to you at one point, if we can go to that slide, that if you lived in India, something nasty could have happened to you, right?
So, Barkha, journalism is a very noble profession, and you know this. I mean, and when you find a story, something like this, of course, I was afraid, but I was building very slowly. I was also cutting my teeth. I was cutting my teeth as being a young mother, but I was
Mhm.
also cutting my teeth in journalism. And
Yeah,
imagine, I mean, this is the biggest story you've got in your country. And
yeah,
in the beginning, I didn't know how big it was going to be. I mean, I didn't know who it was going to be, and I didn't believe Rajiv Gandhi was involved. I genuinely didn't believe, because when the Congress became 100, he said, no, we'll clean up the corridors, and I'll throw out all the arms dealers and all, and I genuinely believed it, because I was young and he was ambitious and I was ambitious, and I continue to be ambitious about my country.
yeah,
So, and then I found that, his job description, Barkha, was not to sell India for, was not, bribes were not in his job description.
yeah,
In my job description, it was to find out the truth. So, it was like I was following this stuff. And then I was also uh, under, growing up as a mother, things like pumping my breast milk, with my mother being here, and she fainting, and then she says, I won't touch it because it's a sin. I go and meet an arms dealer who gives me a complete, like a GPS. He explains to me what's going on. He says, I mean, if you wish, I was just thrown into this thing deep end. Part of
yeah.
it was the thrill, part of it was the fear.
Yeah, and that's usually how it is. It's this weird mix of adrenaline, fear, anticipation, survival. It's so many different things all at once. It's emotionally exhausting, but it's the adrenaline powers you through. Now, you are publishing your exposes initially in the Hindu newspaper, and I want you to talk a little bit about, that relationship with N. Ram. There are portions in your book where you speak about how, Ram instructed you not to speak to the rest of the team who's covering this story. And at times you are upset with him because a lot of documents and information that you're sharing with him, he is sharing with those whom you're actually trying to expose. If we can go to the next slide, please, and look at what the book actually says about N. Ram. And at one point you say N. Ram was often domineering and unsupportive, and your whistleblower is also not happy because Mr. Ram, according to your book, is at some point approaching the Hindujas who are drawn into this quagmire. At one point of time, he talks to Rajiv Gandhi directly, and he says,
Yeah.
"If you, according to your book, he says, if you give me a business class ticket, I will come with boxes of evidence. I'll fly out with boxes of evidence and place it all in front of the relevant authorities." Talk about this relationship. Now, newsrooms are volatile places. They are rocky places. There isn't a reporter in the world who hasn't had a fight with her editor, and vice versa. But at some point, your disagreements with Ram become big enough for you to actually move your reportage to the Indian Express. You say that Ram, you think it's not that you're accusing him of any other conflict of interest, but you say that he was domineering. He felt he knew better. I'm just quoting from the book. You felt that he knew things better than anybody else. And he was directly sharing information with those you were reporting on, and that made you extremely uncomfortable. Talk a little bit about that relationship.
So to begin with, in the beginning, it was a good relationship. I mean, I was doing good work, and Mr. Ram
Hmm.
himself has acknowledged that. I mean, I had got all the documents, but slowly as we moved along, I found that he became the story. Because I mean, I'll give you this most important thing. I mean, with the Hindu Jars, let's take the Hindu Jars set up the interview with the Swedish Prime Minister, Mr. Ingvar Carlsson. Now,
Hmm.
the readers are not told that. The readers are not told that the people who are prime accused have set up the interview. Let them make their own conclusions. No, the Hindu Jar set up that interview, and as a journalist, I feel that should have been told to the reader, because then
Hmm.
they can draw their conclusions to the extent of which the involvement of the Hindu Jars. Then this
Hmm.
whole thing about AE services, it was the most critical piece of evidence I had. AE services linked to the Gandhi family. So now
Yeah.
Mr. Ram tells the prime minister that if he threatens the prime minister and says, if
Hmm.
I know who AE services is, and if you want, yeah, and then he says in an interview to the Week magazine that the prime minister's hands shook like a stenographer. Now, I mean, that's not a nice thing to say. But he says that if you pay me a business class ticket, I'll go and get more documents. So you've not published the AE services. You should publish the documents you have, right? Before
Hmm.
threatening anybody. It's not for you to say that.
Hmm.
Like and then also I felt that, protecting Arun Nehru. And, why are you protecting Arun Nehru? So a series of things that went on. And remember, this was not the type of WhatsApp or, there was no information coming back. So I would just get a call from Kumi Kapoor saying, this is what is going on. And thank God she was there. Because, you would have to, and I was raising a baby. So what's my priority? Somebody's ego or my baby? And then soon
Hmm.
it got involved with the fight for supremacy in the Hindu family. They had an internal
Hmm.
fight, and then this sort of became part of that. So to the extent that and the attitude towards Mr. Sten Lindström was, wouldn't listen to him. We had given him some guarantees, after all, as a whistleblower, that we wouldn't publish, that he would know. So all those guarantees, none of them were respected. You don't
Yeah.
respect, what is the supreme, what is yeah, so when you don't respect your whistleblower, so which I think that is unacceptable for a journalist.
And how did you deal with it at the time? And just to be clear, what comes out in the book is that, as you said, that he approached Rajiv Gandhi. He said, if you give me a business class ticket, I'll place more evidence. He took some material to the Hindu Jars. But you do say that Ram eventually publishes the story on the Hindu Jars. So I just want to be clear
Yes.
that it's not that the story is withheld.
No, he published the story. Of course he published the story, but with them as well, he was playing a game, right? Of course he published the story, and at one point they wanted to interfere with they wanted to edit the interview and all, and he said no. This was in the early days, very early
Hmm.
days, when the thing. But subsequently he moved away from what I would consider top class journalism, which is why
So
I
that
went
is
to the yeah. Sorry.
which is in fact what you write in your book. You say he was, as I said, domineering and unsupportive, and you say that you do not know what was happening, but you would not call it journalism.
Yeah.
You do not accuse him of any sort of financial
No.
irregularity, but you say that what was happening was not journalism. So what would you call it if it was not journalism? What was it?
Influence peddling.
Hmm.
You're trying to show that you have more, that you're a very influential person, and
Hmm.
you have more influence than uh, you can influence the prime minister, so that he gets scared and he starts shaking like a, I mean, he said his hands were trembling like a stenographer, which I think is mean to whoever takes that profession. But sort of, there is a name in Hindi which I don't want to get into, but it was showing how influential you are or how powerful you are. That you can actually threaten the prime minister of a country, which to me was not journalism. Journalism to me means when you get the documents, you print it. You do your corrections, and then you verify it, and then you print it. And by the way, Sten Lindström's name was circulating in Delhi. Now,
Hmm.
how did this happen? So Sten stopped talking to me for a whole month. And then he found out that it was not me. So, there were a whole lot of a lot of stuff going on, and at the background, I'm trying to raise a child, a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Did N. Ram ever have, like sometimes when you have a disagreement, you say what you think, he says what he thinks. Did you ever have that critical conversation with him?
No, because according to me, he is according the conversations with him is that there is no conversation. He's the boss, and he can be never wrong.
Hmm.
That's the thing. Yeah. So there was
So,
no, there was no. I mean, there was absolutely no exchange. No,
so
no,
there wasn't that sort of space to you where
no,
you could
no.
express what was making you unhappy or uncomfortable.
No, but see, at one point, Barkha, you know, yes, he's the boss, right? That we take
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I am, my space as a reporter has also got to be respected, no? And it's a big story. So as
Yeah.
I'm growing in the story, my space as a reporter is also growing.
Yeah.
So when you don't respect my space, and then he sort of went back and forth between editor and reporter. So I would never know which leg to dance on. Am I speaking to the editor or am I speaking to the reporter? So it was uncomfortable for me. And
Yeah.
then things like, we don't do this in the Hindu, we don't do this, that in the Hindu. And then suddenly, can you check this out? Can you check that out? So, it was not easy.
And then your reportage moves to the Indian Express. But I want to come to another very critical set of characters in your book, and that is Amitabh Bachchan and his wife, Jaya Bachchan. Well, she's not a critical character in the Bofors story, but she comes with him. They come to your home for dinner. You are never convinced that Mr. Bachchan has received any sort of money, any sort of bribe. And Bachchan has spoken often. This is only one of the headlines about how painful it was for him to be drawn into this controversy. And he arrives at your apartment. He has dinner with you. Your mother-in-law makes gnocchi. So you can see that I've read the book. And then you start getting attacked for your position on Bachchan. And we'll play out those excerpts. So what you say in the book, if we can bring them up now. And you are called an Amitabh Bachchan mole. There is also sort of slander, which worse kind of slander, which is typical of how women journalists are spoken about, implying a
Exactly.
personal relationship with Amitabh Bachchan and so on. Talk a little bit about, and I think somewhere in the book you say, I was not a Bachchan mole, I was a fan.
Yes.
And so there's a very human account of how the Bachchans come home for dinner. And you say, perhaps for the first time in your life, in the beginning, you're a little tongue tied. You're hoping Bofors doesn't come up. Maybe we'll stick to poetry and Harivansh Rai Bachchan. Of course, that
Yes.
doesn't happen. So what happened?
What happened was that they I talk about it when first call comes and Giancarlo is trying to write the name down, and I'm feeding Nikhil, and then someone on the other side says CH. Giancarlo notes CH. Then he comes back with another CH, and then Giancarlo yells and then says CH. Yes, I know. Then I say, my God, who is calling? So this goes on, and then they come home, and my God, they're so elegant. Mr. Bachchan is like tall and elegant and so very well dressed. And then he
Hmm.
tells Giancarlo, you're taller than me. So I'm completely tongue tied. You have no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't wish to speak about Bofors. It was so petty. But
Hmm.
I don't have the evidence. And imagine telling somebody as grand as him, sir, I don't know. I mean, who am I to blame you? And there is no evidence. And the way the whole thing was done was absolutely vulgar. It was so
Yeah.
vulgar. You won't believe how vulgar it was. And, there is something called the sanctity of an investigation. And you know this. When you're investigating and, you're going slowly, building up one account, every bit of information is precious. You don't
Yeah.
want to get lost. And
Yeah.
then, boom, this sixth account. Where on earth, does it come from? Sixth account
Hmm.
mil gaya, ek aur account mil gaya, and I'm not able to confirm this. I'm not able to confirm this with my sources in Sweden or Switzerland.
Yeah.
So, Mr.
But
Bachchan, yeah, go ahead.
Bofors is seen to have changed the relationship between Mr. Bachchan and the Gandhi family. nobody actually knows for sure. I have tried in multiple interviews over the years to try and understand what happened. How did these two families that were so close completely move apart? But let's stay on Bachchan for just a moment. At some point, you are so convinced of Bachchan's innocence that Bachchan asks you whether you would consider testifying. You think
Yes.
about it and you decide that you can't do it. But you send him a fax,
Yes.
and those were the days of faxes, with whatever you know up until that point.
Yes.
Journalistically, you believe this is not breaching your integrity because you're just sharing what you know and
Yeah.
what you actually believe. But Rajat Sharma, who's a senior journalist here in India, pounces on you, goes after you. He's not the only one, and everybody accuses you of basically shilling for Amitabh Bachchan.
Yes.
How do you deal with this? How do you cope with it?
I think it's very poor journalism because if Rajat Sharma wanted, all he had to do was to pick up the phone and ask me, "What is that fax about?" Right?
Hmm.
Did you send the fax, and can you explain the context of it? But of course not, because I don't believe he's a journalist, and you just go after me. There's a whole context to it, right? This has been so. I don't. I mean, it's such a small detail, and of course, I mean, I don't want to talk about the other rubbish that was written about me because I have them all. But
And
you
that
know,
and that rubbish was basically insinuating a personal relationship between you and
yeah,
Mr. Bachchan.
yeah. Thank God it was him and not someone else, because imagine, I was flattered that, I mean, very flattered. But and thank God my husband. I mean, can you imagine if it was, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
and but if you get something as important as this at a
yeah,
such a critical phase, would you not speak to the person and say, "Listen,
yeah,
I have this facts. Can you please explain?" I mean,
yeah.
that's a basic journalist. So I don't believe he's a journalist. Yeah.
But how did you cope with that? Because Rajat was not the only one going after you. You write in the book that there was, gossip columnists, editors, influential people basically going after you, all guns blazing, for accusing you of protecting Amitabh Bachchan. Now, what I want to ask you is, you describe this evening when they come home for dinner, the gnocchi that's made, your mother-in-law saying what an elegant man. You talk about his perfectly tailored trousers, his socks with that go above his calf, all the rest of it, the
And you read
elegance.
my book. You've read my book.
I have read your book. I am old school in that way. I do not do interviews before reading a book. But my question is, did he seem shaken? Did he seem hurt? Did he seem angry? Or did he not reveal how he was feeling when he comes
Yeah.
home to dinner and talks to you?
We are no. How did I cope? First of all, I didn't get to see all this. Thank God.
Yeah,
It was not in the days of the WhatsApps and that.
correct.
Yeah, we met a few times after that. And of course, he was hurt. He was devastated. The
Hmm.
man was devastated because they went after him. They froze all his bank accounts. I mean, including, I think, I think the man was devastated. The man was devastated. They treated him badly without any evidence. You know,
One of the sentences in your book is Amitabh Bachchan was hounded by the machinery of the Indian state, while
yes,
Wing Chadda, while Wing Chadda was actually being able to come and go with a much greater degree of freedom. And you point
yes.
out that irony that Wing Chadda had more freedom than Amitabh Bachchan. So who was after Amitabh Bachchan? Who do you think was after Amitabh Bachchan? And why?
It's a good question, Barkha. Yeah, Vin Chadda was going in and out of the Indian mission in New York, pretending to be ill. Uh, I think there's a lot of envy, Mr. Bachchan,
Hmm.
Mr. Bachchan being who he is.
Yeah,
Uh, Indians don't like successful people. I
correct.
mean, they just don't like anyone who's successful, who doesn't need the state. And it's just this, I think it's envy. I mean, here was this, I can't, I mean, subsequently, I mean, he was very badly treated. And then he took people to court. But imagine what it means to be accused of something like this. It is horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And it's horrible for me as a journalist, sort of, I'm little compared to him, Barkha, Now
Yeah.
we met a few times in Neo. We were talking. The man was, it was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah.
You are less complimentary about Amitabh Bachchan's brother
Yeah.
Ajita,
Yeah.
who you described to be long on self pity and short on manners, if I remember your sentence correctly. Why was Ajita Bachchan so different to you from his brother?
Because he's like Mr. Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan is self-made, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, Amitabh is what? He's Amitabh Bachchan's brother.
yeah.
So, I mean, he can afford, he's not an Amitabh Bachchan. He's sort of full of himself. Mr. Bachchan is
But
not,
what did Ajita Bachchan want from you? What did he seek from you?
I've built this flat on my own, blah, blah, blah. I'm not interested in your story. I'm here, my children are going to school here. I mean, I'm not interested in your story. He's not an Amitabh Bachchan. Amitabh Bachchan was not at all victimhood. He was not playing the victim, not pretending to be a victim at all. He was
And
more shocked. And Ajita pretended to be a victim and called me at all times of the day and night. And I was telling him I was a small kid. Yeah, I mean, come on.
and did that ever come up in your conversations with Amitabh Bachchan, how his brother was
No,
behaving?
no, no. It was too. I told him, but it was not important enough. No,
Hmm.
I did tell him. What did I tell him? I don't remember. No, he was not important enough.
Hmm. Now, your book is also powered by your relationship with your whistleblowers. And in
Mm.
2012, the whistleblower who goes by the name of Sting reveals himself to be Sten Lindström, who's a former police officer, and there's an interview published with him towards the end of the book, where there are some very important conclusions that I think are worth sharing. And one is that he is absolutely certain that he in his estimation, that Rajiv Gandhi did not receive a bribe but presided over a cover up, and that Kotroki, and let's talk about the person known as Mr. Q, Ottavio Kotroki, a close friend of the Gandhi family, did receive a bribe of $7.2 million, and then he is allowed to flee. Now, I want to first talk about Kotroki, and then we'll come to Mr. Lindstrom. Why do you think Kotroki was allowed to go? And why do you think the Vajpayee government never brought him to justice when they could have?
Because yeah, Quattrochi was he was linked to he is close to Madame Sonia Gandhi, and
Yes.
he brings his AE services, and then the contract he says that if I don't get you the deal within 3 months, you don't have to pay me, which is ridiculous. Nobody knows. There's no arms dealer who would tell you that I can get you a contract. He was a very powerful person.
Hmm.
Why did Mr. Bajpai? I didn't know this, but there was this Mr. Mishra, no, Mr. R.K. Mishra. I mentioned it in. I mean, he said that.
No, there was Brajesh Mishra, who's the
Brijesh,
national.
Brijesh, I get
Yes,
all
yeah,
confused.
yeah.
Brijesh Mishra
I mean, there was
told.
also an R.K. Mishra, who's a
No,
different
no, no, no.
character.
This was Mr. Brijesh
Hmm.
Mishra, because when Mr. Bajpai came to Geneva for a human rights meeting, we had a long conversation,
Yeah.
and sitting next to him was Mr. Brijesh Mishra. So I was explaining everything to him, what happened and
Hmm.
all that. And then,
You explained this to Brajesh Mishra. You
no, no,
yourself.
no, to to the Prime Minister. He
No,
had come for a
you.
human rights meeting. He had come as foreign minister.
I see. I know. I want to get this right. You,
Yeah.
Chitra Subramaniam, are having this conversation with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? All right.
Yes.
Go on. Go
Yes.
on. Then.
In Geneva, when he had come for a human rights commission meeting,
Hmm.
sitting with him was Mr. Brijesh Mishra. So I
Okay.
explained everything to him. This is what happened. This is what happened. Blah blah blah. And then we didn't talk about it.
Hmm.
Then I went to meet Mr. George Fernandez.
Right.
Mr. George Fernandez was defense minister, and he was one of the early people saying, Rajiv Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi. So Mr. George Fernandez told me
Hmm.
that he was told by Mr. Brajesh Mishra to not touch the files. So, you realize there are wheels within wheels, which is when Sten Lindström told me that, the fact that a government goes doesn't mean that the next government is going to go after it. So it was George Fernandez who told me this, that Brajesh Mishra had told him that don't touch the Bofors files because it's so, I mean, look at what it means to me as a journalist. You come to power, on a story, and then you sort of pretend, they just don't respect you as a journalist. So,
But
this
but I'm thinking, why? Like I'm not able to understand, just as a student of politics, Why? I can understand that we can say the Congress didn't want to explore or investigate Bofors because Kothroki was close to the Gandhi family, and Kothroki, the money trail seems to end at the door of Kothroki, at least as far as we can establish with evidence. Now, why would Brajesh Mishra, key aide to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, tell George Fernandez, who's defense minister in their own government, not to touch the Bofors files? Who are they protecting?
Sonia Gandhi.
Why? Why would they need to protect Sonia Gandhi?
I can't answer that. I mean, I don't have an honest answer to that. Did she have to do something with the government staying in power? Would they need her? I don't know. Why would you need to protect her? Right, good question. But I was told this directly by Mr. George Fernandez, that Brajesh Mishra had told him not to touch the Bofors files.
And even if we say that Vajpayee was a different kind of politician, that they all came from a different school of politics where they protected each other, we are no longer living in the Vajpayee era of politics. We are living in a very Darwinian age of politics, and so it's even more startling that we continue to not know the full truth. Towards the end, I want to ask you about Sten Lindström. The interview that you published with him in the book, and you also talk about how nobody from India's officialdom has actually met with this whistleblower who powered so much of your reportage, but also kept a protective eye over you. Talk about that.
Why they didn't meet, I cannot understand. Mr. Katre was there, the head
Yeah.
of CBI. The document, they somehow didn't want to meet him. And I think they're afraid. They were
Of
afraid finding
of
out
what?
that the documents were correct, that there was corruption at the highest level, that Mr. Gandhi oversaw one of the biggest corruption scandals in India. Even he didn't take any money, but the whole system was corrupt to protect him. If you look at the legislature, the parliament, everything was corrupt. This is what General Sundari says in this interview, that kind of damage will take a many years to recover, if you recover at all. So
That's important because I think people of this generation will not remember that the JPC, the parliamentary panels, everybody basically gave a clean sheet.
yes, yes, everybody gave a clean chit. The JPC gave a clean chit without even having an investigation. Everybody was out to give a clean chit.
Yes.
So when you have the whole system doing that, and by the way, Sten Lindström's daughter Ilva, she's going to release the book, because she's coming to release the book, because that's how important it is. I mean, this also reflected on Sweden. It had, so nobody went and met Mr. Lindström, as if they were afraid to face the truth.
How did he process that? What was his interpretation of it?
Philosophical.
Hmm.
He's a very stoic person. So, when I told him I was very happy that Mr. VP Singh came to power, he said, well, Chitra, there are wheels within wheels.
VP Singh did meet with him, right? If I'm not wrong, VP Singh met with Lindstrom? No. Nobody
Nobody.
ever met with Lindstrom?
No, 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 no. And he said, there are wheels within wheels. I mean, for him, the disappointment itself was to see how his own government, social democrats, were so corrupt. So is a very stoic, philosophical person, and there were times when I wanted to give up, and he said, no, you can't give up. You have to go. So, um,
Is there some sense in you? I mean, obviously, as journalists, our job is to do the story and then let the story speak for itself. We are not there to direct the change that should flow from the story. But when you saw Kothroki be able to leave India, when you saw, and by the way, I think you shared a Facebook post in an earlier interview of Amitabh Pandey, who was then an IS officer in the government, and he spoke about how I'll send it to you. I found it in my research, but basically he was an IS officer who spoke about how everybody was looking the other way while Kothroki was leaving India. That was the important part, and eventually his accounts get unfrozen. Kothroki is basically able to get access to those
get
bribes. We have
away.
presumed, yeah. Now, when you see all of this decade of hard work, and then you see a Kothroki get away, you see the sealed box of documents still lying in CBI unopened. Do you sometimes feel frustrated journalistically?
Yes, Barkha, I do,
Yeah.
and I have felt bad, but I'm a very positive person. I have to go on. I mean, I can't tell my children, no, that it's okay to be corrupt, don't get caught. And this is where the mother raising the kids is, you have to fight. You have to fight. And, systems are like that. They will crash in all around you, but you can't give up. Giving up is too easy. So I go on, ups and downs, crying, all of that, Barkha. I'm only human.
And were they roused in the family over how consumed you were by the story?
Oh yes. Giancarlo and I didn't speak for almost a year. We were going
Yeah.
around the house and all. Oh yeah, the marriage also took a beating.
Yeah.
It's impossible that it doesn't.
Yeah, it happens. How can it not happen?
Yeah, exactly.
So how did what happened? Like, what would you tell yourself? Or would you not have to tell yourself anything because you were so consumed by the story, which I kind of relate fully to?
What would I tell myself?
When this conflict is happening, right? You've got all of these anxieties about this investigation. You've got your husband in somewhat of a angry sulk. You've got your own guilt as a mother. All of this is happening, but you're actually overwhelmingly consumed by the story. So how do you deal with these competing impulses in you, or was it not even really a competition? The story won every time.
Story won every time. But the story was guilty, and then I was talking to myself, and I was doing everything. I thought I was pretending I wasn't a mother. I was pretending I wasn't doing this. I wasn't pretending I wasn't scared. Everything was going around at the same time. But the documents were coming. I mean, Sten told me you don't have a choice. You are the fulcrum. The documents will keep coming. So even the thing, we should talk about how, when the whole uh, uh, Madhav Siv Solanki happened, and I was not going to work on that. And I said, I'm not going to work. I'm not going to the facts.
That's
So my
right.
soul said, if you don't go to the facts, you'll regret it. And then this fax comes out. Mr. Madhav Singh. And then that too, Mr. Prabhu Chawla says he had the document. I mean, look at them. He didn't get the document. I got. I mean, I can't believe that people actually, claim credit for work they have not done. So I became like this thing that documents kept coming to me. And
Yeah.
but I don't have if today someone tells you, a mother, a working woman, that it's easy, it's not easy. It will never be easy. Let no one tell you that it's going to be easy. You cannot be
And it,
perfect.
and it will always be so much tougher for women. I mean, we may not
Absolutely.
be.
And you'll be judged. And this is something Madhu Trahan told me. You will be judged for everything except your work. You'll be judged for the way you look, the way you stand, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you everything. So, I have a daughter now. She's in her mid-30s. And, wonderful son-in-law. But the burden of raising the house and all that, it's disproportionately on the woman, because
Always.
the labor market doesn't understand that, women have a different role to play. So let no one tell, let no one tell you that, oh, it's going to be perfect, because there's no perfect. There's
Yeah.
nothing perfect.
Not just is there no perfect, a woman will be judged, as you said, for everything but her work.
Mhm.
And if she succeeds, despite that, she'll be despised at
Oh, yeah,
times.
absolutely. She'll be despised, and all kinds of things will be said, which is why I now think we've got to simply go and claim our space, Barkha. We
Yeah,
have, I mean, I'm
absolutely.
talking about all these journalists. There's Kumi Kapoor, Madhu Trehan, Tavleen Singh,
Yeah.
Suchita Dalal, Suhasini Haider, you, Dhanya Rajendran. We've simply got to go and claim our space. And, people who criticize us can go fish.
I couldn't agree more. I want to end by asking you, journalism is in somewhat of a crisis the world over. So much has changed. Technology has changed, politics has changed. We live in a polarized market. Some of us still belong to that generation where we want the facts to speak. We don't have an interest in being the story. Sometimes we may become the story, but it's not out of choice. We want the facts to speak. Today, for those who say journalism is irrelevant, having been the journalist who broke one of the most consequences story of contemporary India, when you are told journalism is becoming redundant, what would you say today to young people, in particular young women?
I don't agree. I think that, on the contrary, there's a pushback. There are lots of things happening already in India. When you can see the news minute, there's a news laundry. People are journalism. There's a tide in journalism now, and people are saying the magic of journalism. Of course, it's not at the level of the corporate. The entire the business model has changed.
Yeah,
I think the business model must change. Look at your own story. You've built a new ship and you're going ahead with the ship.
yeah.
And I think that, I think India is a super place to be a journalist today. Despite all the problems we have, and we just saw what's going on in Washington Post. The very fact that we can sit and criticize the prime minister, say all kinds of things about our prime minister, and continue to do so, or the kind of investigation that's going on, I believe it's a great place to be.
And I agree. And I think the only thing that we should remember, and your life bears witness to that, is that in the end, this is a passion profession. It is
Yeah,
nothing but a passion profession. And if you do not have a stomach ache at night
yeah,
thinking about your story, you don't love it. And if you don't love it,
yeah.
you're going to hate it. Journalism is one of those things. If you don't love it, you're going to hate it. And while you love it, you may hate it too, but eventually you've got to love it. Chitra Subramaniam, the book is here with me. Bofors Gate, a journalist's pursuit of the truth. It doesn't matter which side of politics you're on. This book is not about party politics. This book
Yeah.
is about one of the most definitive consequences, moments in India's contemporary politics, media space, national security. It's about so many things. It's about so many characters. Do please read it if you haven't. It is absolutely riveting. Chitra, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barkha.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.